Hi everyone, it's late at night and I'm getting ready to go to bed, but part of my nighttime routine, at least one night a week, is to feed my sourdough starter so that the following morning I can start to make some sourdough bread. And since I get asked all the time from so many of you how I make it, I thought I'd go ahead and walk you through the steps. I have had this sourdough starter for over 2 years when my friend Brandy first taught me all about sourdough bread baking, and she had so much wonderful information. I'll go ahead and include a link in case you didn't see that video. We called it Sourdough for Beginners because she really explained everything in great detail. But right now what I'm going to do is feed my starter. And I've managed to keep it alive by only feeding it 1 day a week. Some people say that you should feed it every single day, but I guess I'm kind of a rule breaker because I don't do that. Anyway, I'm going to weigh this right now, and you definitely need to have a scale. So let me zero that out. And you can see right there that this weighs 880 grams. Now I know that my jar weighs 740 grams, so I'm going to subtract 740 from 880, and that leaves me with 140 grams. So that means that I need to feed this 140 grams of flour and 140 grams of bottled or distilled water. Now you never want to use tap water because if there's chlorine in it or fluoride or something, it could mess up the natural bacteria that forms in your sourdough. But I'm going to go ahead and measure out 140 grams of flour. And I'll do that first. Let me zero that out. Okay, so I'm going to measure out 140 grams. And it should be exact or as close to exact as possible. There we go, 140. Set this aside, and now zero this out again, and I'll measure out 140 grams of water. And that's close enough. And now we just put this into my starter. Got some on the counter, but I was trying to pour it in there so that the camera could see. Now I'll add the water. And I'll stir. And I'm going to add just a tiny bit of flour just to compensate for what fell. And that's probably more, but anyway, let me just add this real quick. Okay. And that is basically it. I'm just going to cover it, and I'm going to leave it on the counter overnight, and in the morning it should be nice and bubbly, and it should rise. It should weigh more than double in size. It's now the next morning, and you can see that my starter is active and bubbly, but more important, it's more than doubled in size. So now we can make the dough for our sourdough bread. And you want to do this first thing because you don't want this to start to deflate, which is what happens with your sourdough. It gets bubbly and active, and then it goes down. So now's the perfect time. So for this recipe, you're going to need 100 grams of active sourdough starter. And you're going to need to use your scale. I already zeroed this out. I need a little more. There, I've got 100 grams. And everything that I'm going to do today, I'm going to do twice because I'm making 2 loaves of sourdough. But if you're just making one, all you need is the 1 bowl with 100 grams of active sourdough starter. And there we go. We have 100 in that one. So now I can put my starter back in the refrigerator, and at this point it will become discard. But there's all sorts of recipes that you can make with your sourdough discard. Or if I wanted to make something else, I could use it right now. Sometimes I make pancakes. You can make all sorts of things. The trick is you want to get it as low as possible, because when you feed it, you have to feed it however much it weighs, and you don't want to be feeding it a whole lot. If it's up here, then you're just going to start making mounds and mounds of sourdough starter. So you want to keep it as low as possible, use as much as you possibly can. So now that I've got 100 grams of sourdough starter in these bowls, I'm going to measure out 500 grams of flour and 400 grams of water for each of them, 10 grams of salt, and that's basically your recipe. 400. Okay, so now I'm going to pour this into one of my bowls. And I'll measure out another 400 grams for the other one. And by the way, if you hear what sounds like a whimpering dog outside, that's actually Rocky, our roadrunner. We thought that there was a dog out there hurt or something, and so we went out there and we were searching and couldn't find him, but Rocky's following us. And while Rocky's following us, we stopped hearing it. And I did some research online, and I found that roadrunners sound exactly like a whimpering dog at times. And I don't know what's going on this morning, but he's doing that a lot. Anyway, let me continue here. Now I'm going to add 10 grams of salt. I'll pour this into one of the bowls. I'll measure out 10 grams again. Pour it in the other bowl. And now I'm just going to stir this until it sort of dissolves into the water. It won't do it completely, but it'll get pretty close. So the water sort of gets milky. Now I'm going to do the other one. I'm going to lose all this. Okay, now we measure out 500 grams of flour. Okay, so now I'm going to add the flour into the first bowl. And I'll measure it out for the second one. I will say one thing, since I started baking sourdough, I go through a lot of flour. So I now buy it in really big bags. Okay, there's 500 grams for this bowl. And now I'm just gonna combine it. You just mix just until it's combined. You don't have to go overboard. So it's gonna make a really wet dough. And you'll just see how it changes over the course of time. Okay, so that one's done. And now what we do is we're gonna cover them with some damp kitchen towels. And the kind of kitchen towel you use actually matters. So you don't want a terry towel. You want something like this. Just a basic cotton one. And I'm going to just soak them in water. I'll wring them out, and then I'm going to put them in the microwave because I want them to get nice and warm. And I always put them in for 45 seconds. And they'll get nice and hot. Okay, they're nice and hot. And now we just use them to cover our bowls. And the reason you wet them is you just want your dough to stay moist the whole time. It's a wet dough. So we're basically done for now. Our first stretch and fold will be in 30 minutes, and we're gonna do 4 of them, basically every 30 minutes for the first 2 hours. You wanna wash your hands really good and don't dry them, because it actually helps if your hands are wet to handle the dough. Otherwise the dough will stick to you. So you're just gonna stretch, and you'll notice that right now it just easily breaks apart because the gluten has not yet formed. But I'm just trying to stretch it and fold it over on all sides. But you'll see how that starts to change. And you don't need a whole lot, just all sides. That's good for that one. Now let me stretch and fold this one. And that's all you need to do. Now let me grab the towels. Put them on again. And if there's an area in your house that stays warm, that's best. You just want it to stay as warm as possible. You can even put this like in the oven, like maybe boil some water and put a glass of hot water in there and keep it in an enclosed area where it stays warm. Right now, the sun's not really coming in through the window, but once it is, I might move these to wherever the sun hits it just so that they stay warm. But for now, I'm just gonna leave them here, and we'll do this again in 30 minutes. This is stretch and fold number 2. And the only reason I show you is because I want you to see how the dough starts to change. I don't want to bore you by doing the exact same thing. You wash your hands, you heat the towels, et cetera, et cetera. You already know that. But I just want you to see that it's not tearing already. And this is barely fold number 2. It just becomes a little more elastic as the gluten starts to build. But that's it. We'll see you in 30 minutes. So this is the 4th and final stretch and fold. And by now our dough is super stretchy. It doesn't tear at all. The gluten has built up nicely. So we're just gonna do this one last time, and then we're gonna let it bulk ferment, or basically proof, for anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. So what's gonna happen during that time is it's gonna rise on its own. So it kind of makes its own yeast. We're not using yeast in this recipe, but that's the beauty of sourdough. It has like a natural yeast that it makes on its own. So that's basically it. I'm gonna cover this with our hot towels, and I'm gonna let it sit, like I said, for 6 to 8 hours. So now I can get on with my day. It's been 8 hours, so the bulk fermentation is done, and we're now ready to shape our dough and put it in the refrigerator overnight to cold proof. Now, it doesn't always take 8 hours. It could be 5 or 6 hours. Really, a lot of it depends on the temperature, but what you're looking for at this point is your dough should have doubled in size. It should be a little jiggly when you go like this, and there should definitely be signs of bubbling on top. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly flour my surface, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the dough onto it. And the dough is very sticky at this point. Don't want to add too much flour, but I'm going to do a go ahead and add some just so that it doesn't stick to my fingers. I'm going to flip it over. And what I'm doing here is kind of giving it a little tension. And that's basically it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that wet kitchen towel that I had covering the bowls, and I'm going to put this back in there. If you have a Banneton basket that's special for making dough, obviously that's what you use. I don't have one. I just use my regular bowls and kitchen towels. And these are still damp because I wet them throughout the time that they're bulk fermenting. So I'm going to put some flour on here. Then I'm going to grab this and place it on there. Make sure there's enough flour so it doesn't stick to the towel. And I'm going to drop this right back in the bowl that it was in. And this is ready to go into the refrigerator. So the reason that we put this in the refrigerator to cold proof is it slows down the fermenting process, and this is what makes sourdough so healthy, because it makes it more digestible. So people who have like stomach issues and have a hard time digesting bread, and they try to remain gluten-free for that reason, they actually can have sourdough because it breaks down easier. So that's what cold proofing does. It also makes your bread tangier, so it gives it that great sour taste that we all love. So you don't want to skip that step. It's still going to rise, it's just going to rise a little slower. Okay, so now with this second loaf, just to be different, I am going to add some green chili and cheese. And I don't know if I'm doing this right or not. I just started doing this on my own and it tastes great, so I'm doing that. Anyway, I thawed out some hatched green chili, and I just got a little pepper jack and cheddar cheese here, and I'm gonna add it to my dough, and I'm just gonna kind of fold it in before I turn it onto my flat surface. And again, I don't claim to be an expert. This is just something that I started doing and I kind of like it. So, you know, you don't have to do it, but I like experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't. Okay, now I'm going to flour my surface. Now I'm going to add some flour on top. It is definitely a very, very wet dough, especially now with the chili. Add even more flour. Now typically you don't want to add this much, but because there's liquid in the chili, I'm kind of forced to. Otherwise, I can't work with this. And I'm just increasing the tension here. And that looks good right there. So I'm gonna do the same thing with the other kitchen towel. Add some flour to it so that it doesn't stick. Okay, and now this one is ready to go into the fridge too. And we are done for tonight, putting this in the fridge, and we'll bake them both tomorrow. It's now the next day and I'm ready to bake my bread. Once your dough has cold-proofed in the refrigerator overnight, you can bake it at your leisure. You probably have a 48-hour window, maybe even more. And hopefully you have a Dutch oven, because what baking bread in a Dutch oven does is it traps the steam inside, and that results in that crispy exterior, and it also helps your dough to rise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to preheat my oven to 500 degrees, and I'm also going to preheat my Dutch oven at the same time. If you don't have a Dutch oven, go ahead and bake your bread on a regular baking sheet, but maybe put another baking pan underneath with some water so that it creates some steam in the oven for you and you get the same effect. Now what I'm going to do is take some parchment paper, and you want to get a good quality parchment paper. You don't want your dough to stick to it. And I'm going to go ahead and lightly flour it. And we'll take out our dough. That looks great. So I'm just going to carefully lay it on there. And I'm going to add some more flour on top. And here you want to add plenty. Just going to smooth it all over. Because what this does is it's going to show off your design. Now I'm going to take my scoring blade, or just a regular razor blade, and you can score it in whatever pattern you want. But what I tend to do most is just kind of like the little barley leaf pattern. And I like to do it going all the way around. You can see how there's just so many ways that you can do this. I've experimented with a lot of different patterns. I saw this one girl on Instagram one time do the most gorgeous like Christmas trees, and it was Christmas time. So I was able to do it and they turned out beautiful. But anyway, you can always find inspiration on Pinterest, or you can go on YouTube and see what other people are doing. And then you just kind of come up with your own pattern and you see what works for you. And that's basically it. Now we just have to wait for the oven to preheat to 500 degrees so that I could put this inside that Dutch oven. And I'll go ahead and wash this meantime. Okay, my oven has now reached 500 degrees, and so has the Dutch oven inside. So I'm going to carefully take it out, remove the lid, and then I'm going to drop the bread into it. Now, a trick that my friend showed me is you can add a couple of ice cubes and that'll create even more steam. But I'm just going to drop it in like that. Put my mittens back on so that I can cover this. And now I'll put it in the oven. And we bake for 30 minutes. After the 30 minutes, you're going to want to reach into the oven and just remove the lid. Because what you want now is just for the top of your bread to brown. So you could leave it in there another 5 minutes, another 10 minutes. It's entirely up to you and how you want your bread to look. But while mine is browning, I'm going to go ahead and start working on the second loaf, the green chili cheese one. Okay, now I'm going to check the bread.
see that.
You can leave it in a little longer if you want it to get darker, but I really like it like this. So I'm gonna go ahead and take it out. And this is a timing thing. I'm gonna try to remove this quickly because I want this to stay hot so that I can quickly drop this in. And then I can bake this one. Obviously, if you were just baking one loaf, that wouldn't matter. But I will show you at the end when I have them both done. So here are my two beautiful, freshly baked sourdough loaves. This one is the classic sourdough loaf, and this one is the Hatch green chili and cheese sourdough loaf. You can even smell the green chili. It smells wonderful. But what I really want you to do is come in closer so that you can hear this. That is the mark of a really good sourdough bread, where it's crispy on the outer exterior and it's soft and pillowy and delicious in the middle. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to be cutting into these because I'm going to be giving them away as gifts. In fact, I even have these special bags that are made just for sourdough loaves where they've got that clear top. And I've got some personalized stickers that say "Baked with Love" by Marcy. And I share this for those of you who bake a lot of bread because I found these on Temu or Temu, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but I think I got 50 bags for under $4, so it was quite the bargain. So again, I share that with those of you who bake a lot of bread because I thought you'd find that useful. Now, for those of you who have never baked sourdough bread, I just want to encourage you. Don't feel intimidated because it's actually very, very doable. All you need is time because the individual steps are pretty simple. It's just that it is done over the course of 2 or 3 days. So again, you just need to be patient and you'll even get to a point where it becomes addicting. It's so fun working with sourdough when you come up with so many wonderful combinations and start using your sourdough discard for making other things. And it's just a really, really fun journey that I encourage you to do. And one more thing I want to say is now after seeing this, I hope that when you go to a farmer's market and you see that they're selling artisan sourdough bread for $10 or $12 for just a single loaf of bread, I hope that you understand why now, because sourdough bread really is a labor of love. And as a bonus, it's got health benefits for eating it too. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and be sure to check out my other video on sourdough for beginners coming up next.